We're going to get started. Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're doing a discussion on state-led legislative programs, and I guess Melanie will lead us off on this, please.
Okay. So just a quick update on where things stand in Annapolis. We're halfway through already, a little more than halfway through, so lots of stuff going on. Even some new stuff, which I'll just touch on really briefly. The Kerwin bill was heard on Monday. It was a huge hearing. And so that is beginning to be a work in progress. The House Appropriations Committee and the House Ways and Means Committee have formed a small group to begin to consider amendments on that piece of legislation. Then the bill is assigned in the Senate to Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs and Budget and Tax. So we have 3 members that are involved in the bill from that perspective: Senator King and Senator Zucker in Budget and Tax, and then Senator Kagan on EHEA. Also, House Bill 1 popped up on the Senate agenda. So that piece of legislation has already been heard in the Senate now. So we look forward to that piece of legislation moving fairly quickly, and hopefully with our amendments will stay intact there. I believe that they will. Big piece of legislation did pop out at the end of last week. Sales tax on services.
Can you move the mic just a little
Sure.
closer? Yeah, it's hard to hear. Thanks.
Right, which would basically apply 5% sales tax on all services in the state, which is a reduction down from 6. So I think that hearing, I'm trying to think if it's this week or early next week. So that will be also a hearing that will compete with Kerwin for a lot of people interested in that piece of legislation. So that's really where things stand. And also I know that you were carbon copied on a letter that the business community sent out. And I think it was resent to you also over the weekend, a letter from the business community about the myriad of tax bills that have been introduced in the legislature, and recommending that the legislature, or supporting that the legislature package everything, put it together, and look at it in a more comprehensive way, potentially over the summer. And so I just wanted to lay that out there since I know you all received that email. So,
Okay.
and we do have some pieces of legislation
Yep.
for you that we're going to run through, if that's all right with you.
Please.
Okay. First piece of legislation involves the businesses around the Purple Line that are impacted as a result of construction. This is the 3rd time we've seen this type of a proposal. This particular bill would allow for a state income and property tax for businesses that suffer income losses as a result of the construction. I did recently see a significant set of amendments for this piece of legislation that would amend the bill to turn it into a grant program, which actually might better suit this type of a program. So the county executive does support this piece of legislation. It has been heard in the House already, but the hearing in the Senate, I think, is coming up on Wednesday. The bill number, it's House Bill 540 and Senate Bill 645.
Okay. Any discussion on that? We're all fine with that. When the staff is recommending we support, and I guess everyone is okay with that. We're supporting.
Okay.
Very good.
All right, I'm going to turn this one over to Catherine.
Thanks, Mel. Mr.
If
President.
you could move your mic in front of you too, please. There we go.
Does that
Thank
work?
you. Yeah, that's better.
Better? Okay. So this bill, by the way, which is the lead sponsor, is Delegate Plakovich Carr, who's here as well today. I know Councilmember Joando has worked extensively with Delegate Plakovich Carr on it. And it's a bill that is intended to allow the county to create more progressivity in its property taxation. So as I understand current law, the county is limited to imposing the same property tax on most classes of property. And the General Assembly does have authority to change that. There are some constitutional issues here, but unless you need to, I won't go into those in depth. But essentially, the General Assembly does have authority to allow the county to impose different tax rates on different subclasses of real property if the General Assembly specifically authorizes the county or counties to do that, and if the subclassifications of real property are listed in statute in state law. So this bill addresses both of those pieces. It puts into state law a number of subclasses of real property, and the classes include breaking down between small commercial real property, large commercial real property, industrial, residential rental with at least 4 units, residential condominiums, commercial or industrial condominiums, real property used for both residential and commercial, but primary residential, used for both residential commercial, but primary commercial, residential townhouse or row house, residential real property that has at least 5,000 square feet of improvements, real property that is exclusively used for residential purposes, has less than 5,000 square feet of improvements, and is not an apartment, a condominium, a townhouse, or a row house, and abandoned real property. So again, the intent of the bill would be that it does authorize counties to impose different tax rates on those different subclasses of real property. It's not a requirement. It's essentially an enabling bill that authorizes local jurisdictions to, if they choose to, use this new authority to create more progressivity in property tax. It's not a bill that allows collection of more property taxes per se. I mean, in Montgomery County, our charter limit still applies, et cetera. But in terms of tax rates and distribution of who's paying taxes and how much, that's what it's intended to address.
Okay. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you. I feel very strongly I disagree with the recommendation here. I think that we should not just not support it, I think we should oppose it. I think that this will really threaten to undermine our significant efforts as a council to work on our economic competitiveness as we talk about raising property taxes on larger properties. It is the wrong message to be sending at the worst time, in my view. We do have a mechanism to look at how we charge property taxes through the credit that we provide to taxpayers that this body looks at every year through the GO committee and ultimately through the full council. I understand the interest in progressivity. That is what that mechanism is set up to look at and to do, where we, through the charter limit, change the amount of credit that you as a homeowner get, and that changes the value in which a property either pays more or pays less based on the rate of that credit. This just, to me, at a time when we are fighting as hard as we can against really detrimental initiatives like one that was, I believe, delivered across the street, I think this really hurts our argument in terms of doing that. And I think that we are working extremely hard in so many other facets to make the case that we are competitive, that we want to be attractive to businesses, to people who are successful, to people who make investments, the very people whose tax revenue we desperately need to fund the services to support the most vulnerable in our community. And this takes a dramatic step backwards, I think. And then in addition to that, the very fact that we have an income tax as a local jurisdiction is not common. Most local jurisdictions around the country only charge property taxes. The fact that we have an income tax at all is an extremely progressive tax structure compared to how most are compared. And then I'll just, add one last piece of this. When we talk about the issues related to income inequality and others, which I wholeheartedly agree on, we have to remember that we're not Congress, that we are not doing national policy here, that these are local policies with regional consequences, and that we are competing with our regional counterparts across the river in DC and elsewhere. and the messages that we send and the policies that we put in place have real consequences to how competitive we are, and that inability to be competitive or ability to be competitive has a direct impact on the revenue that we need to attract businesses, attract families, to grow our tax base, which should be our focus, and not sending the message to our residents that we're focused only on raising our tax rates.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to thank Delegate Polakovich-Carr, who came today, for working with her on this bill. We just had a press conference to talk about why it's important. For many reasons, it gives us the authority and maximum flexibility here at the council, which is, I think, part of the reason that council staff recommended approving it, to address the needs and provide relief for our residents. I think it's important to note that this would not go over the charter limit. It would not raise property taxes over the charter limit, unlike what was done several years ago for good purposes to invest in education, where everyone's taxes, property taxes, were raised. Under this type of proposal and what I have laid out, if you were to, for example, add a dime on to the property tax rates for those who are fortunate enough in our community to have homes that are 5,000 square feet or larger, and of the 336,000 homes in Montgomery County, there are 5,130 of those homes. If just a dime would allow you to lower taxes for 98.5% of county homeowners, lower taxes. And what that would mean, as an example, for someone who has a 2,000 square foot home, they could see somewhere around $537 in a reduction of their property taxes. And I think at a time where most Americans, including many Montgomery County residents, cannot access $300 in emergency cash in recent surveys, that's a real savings. And that's something that is helpful to our residents and something that they could use today. It's also not fair. I was at a church on Sunday and asked how many people own homes. About 80% raised their hand. I said, how many of you knew that you pay the same property tax rate on your home as Daniel Snyder, the owner of the Redskins, who's a 20,000 square foot home? No one raised their hand. And I said, how many do you think that's fair? No one raised their hand. The idea that we shouldn't have the flexibility to make our system more fair when we are struggling with wealth and income inequality at rates we've never seen. People can't access $300 in cash in an emergency. I've heard from families who choose to skip a mortgage so they can buy their prescription drugs or pay for their child care that month. And if that's not something we should be discussing here on the county council, I don't know what issues we should be discussing. This is, of course, a debate at every level of government, but we have a role. We have a flat property tax that serves as a regressive tax. And I know we'll discuss the income side as well, but where it's similarly flat, where no matter whether you make $2 million or $20,000, you pay the same 3.2 local income tax, no matter who you are. And we should have that discussion. So, final point I'll make, this is also an economic development strategy. Fairness and relieving pressure on 98.5% of residents is an economic development strategy. You're not going to start a business. I often talk about 98% of our businesses being less than 50 people. If you can't meet your daily and monthly obligations, we need to relieve pressure off of middle and working class families so that they can be innovative, so that they can start a business, so they can take a risk. And this is connected to that. So I would urge my colleagues, we can have the debate about what the right rates are. Final point, this just gives us the authority to say we want to take a look at this, and I think it's something we should take a look at.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Playas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Boucher,
Yes, sir.
I would like to dive a little bit into an aspect of this proposed legislation. My understanding is that there are already jurisdictions, particularly municipalities, that have this authority. Is that a correct bit of information?
I believe it's essentially correct. The bill, the municipalities, for some reasons that I still don't understand, although having tried to look into it, do have authority to set different property tax rates for different subclasses of property that counties do not. So essentially, I said there's two pieces of this bill. The first part, which is to give counties authority to set special rates on the subclasses that the General Assembly then creates, is modeled after the language that currently applies to municipalities. And the new language that sets out the subclassifications, it's my understanding, and I could be corrected, my understanding that all of those subclassifications are already used by SSTAT, and it's my understanding, again, I'm saying I could be corrected, it's my understanding that all of the subclasses you see here except the 5,000 square foot distinctions
And the abandoned, that's a new one.
and the abandoned are actually subclassifications that SSTAT has created and that municipalities have authority to impose different tax rates on. So that's my understanding.
I see nodding from council staff, so, okay. So if there are municipalities and other levels of government that have this authority, one could simply ask the question is why we don't and why shouldn't we? And so I'll use that as the basis point to say, I think we should, if for no other reason than to allow us the introspection, to have an introspective look at our systems. Quite frankly, I think we need to take a comprehensive look at our structures across the board to figure out the new revenue sources that are coming in, whether it is through economic development, whether it is through the different types of tax policy, the property tax, the SSTAT, impact fees. There are a lot of different policies and regulations that haven't been looked at in quite some time. And I think, quite frankly, the bottom line is if other levels of government, quite frankly, municipalities, have this ability, I don't know why we should be denied that ability as well. And for that reason alone, I'll support this.
Thank you very much. Can you clarify whether the municipalities have it based on square footage?
No, as far as I know, the parts of this bill that create some square footage classifications, no, that does not exist.
Julie, would you like, Delegate Plavkovich-Carr, would you like to come forward, please, and clarify that? You're going to need to come on your microphone. There you go. Thank you.
So right now, municipalities can choose whatever classes they want. It's actually not outlined in state law which subclasses of real property that they can tax. So the municipalities that have done it thus far have chosen on their own how they wanted to define it. Basically, the guidance we've been given by the Attorney General's offices, it has to be based on some kind of physical characteristics of the property. It couldn't be based on value. So some examples of one of the more common ways that municipalities have delineated is, say, separating out apartments from other types of residential property. But there would be nothing barring municipalities from taking a similar approach right now.
And that was always my understanding, that they could do it based on use or whatever, the zone, but not by the size of the lot or the improvements. That's always been my understanding. I mean, obviously you have to.
Right.
You know more than I do on this.
Yeah, there's nothing in state law or in terms of the state constitution that would bar municipalities from taking that route.
You know
right
of any
now.
that have?
I have
done
not
it?
looked at what all the municipalities have done. I've only looked at a handful.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember, were you finished, Councilmember Glass? Yes, thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. So, this is an interesting one because, again, part of our challenge is that we want to make sure that folks understand that we're not jumping ahead of the gun when it comes to legislation in Annapolis. And I think that it's dangerous for us when we start spouting off how we could manipulate our tax structure in a certain way to, exempt a certain number of people from this and have this many people pay that. I'm always reminded of a person who's since passed on, but Delegate Paige Elmore, who served with me in Ways and Means, when we were looking at a millionaire's tax that we were about to impose on the state. And I looked to Paige as he raised his hand and voted yes, something that would have disproportionately affected Montgomery County residents more than anyone, but Paige himself, who was also a millionaire. And he joked and said to me, Craig, if my accountant can't get me at $999,999, he's fired. And I think that, again, we have to make sure that we understand that when we're constructing tax policy, that we need to make sure that we're cognizant of the fact that folks have abilities to do different kinds of things to make sure that tax policy favors them. And the people who can best do that are the people who are oftentimes at the top of these tiers. And so I don't like translating all of my moves before we even get into the passage of a bill. For me, it's one in which it's a little concerning and disconcerting to start putting promises in people's heads about what they're going to see regarding when it comes to tax reduction, when we know the reality is that we have so many needs that are before this county that I couldn't see us cutting taxes for anyone realistically when we just walked out of a meeting this morning with a CIP to where we're cutting schools that need support and service and have infrastructure that's failing, and yet we're going to talk about giving money back to folks. Really? That's our conversation, and that's how we're leading into this bill? Again, just not the right sort of mindset when it comes to our conversations around Kerwin and when it comes to the Build to Learn Act. We need to be talking about how our state can continue to help us in terms of giving us additional resources that we've been asking for decades when it comes to paying for a lot of the things that county residents have been ponying up and paying for decades. That's where our conversation should start. And I applaud Delegate Polakovich-Carr for her innovation in terms of trying to come up with ways in which local jurisdictions can afford to pay for these kinds of things. These are conversations that will need to be had. I'd like to see the state come up with their way in which they're going to pay for their portion of Kerwin first before I start thinking about what it is that I'm going to need to do as far as my policy. And so from that perspective, I can't support this at this time. This is something where I need to have a little bit more information and know where the state's going to be when it comes to enhancing its tax policy before I start talking about what I'm going to be doing with mine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a context question, and then I have a few comments to make. Do we have a sense of the chance of the passage of this bill? Has there been any discussion or deliberation among colleagues as to whether or not they're showing signs of support within the delegation or at the state level?
I mean, the
Either
hearing
Mr.
isn't
Shea-
even till this week, and it has not been discussed in
Delegate Pla-
delegation.
You might want to just stay up here for the moment, please. It's always good seeing you, Julie.
Yeah, so the bill hearing is on Thursday before Ways and Means. MACO is supporting the legislation. We do have a bipartisan group of delegates from the Ways and Means Committee who are supporting it. Because it's enabling and really just gives more flexibility to the counties, I'm hopeful that things will progress. I'll just say more broadly about revenue proposals this year, that there are an awful lot of revenue generating options that are on the table that delegates who've been around longer than I have pointed out that, even just a couple sessions ago would not have been seriously considered at all. So pretty much everything's on the table this year in terms of how do we actually pay for the Kerwin recommendations, both at the state level and to give more flexibility to the local governments to pay for their share as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I guess, obviously this is a critically important discussion. The disparity in wealth across our country has become the primary talking point of the Democratic primary this year during the presidential debates. And clearly this is an issue across our entire country and certainly right here in Montgomery County. I guess my concern, as articulated by Councilmember Friedson, and let me just begin by acknowledging and appreciating Councilmember Jawando's thoughtful manner in which he's gone about this, and you, Delegate Polakovich-Carr, for your willingness to work on the introduction of this bill. But I guess where I fall on this is You know, we all read the report recently that our colleagues in Prince George's County have surpassed us with regards to economic development here locally. And so we are now not just competing with our colleagues and friends across the river and the District of Columbia, but we're competing with local jurisdictions right here within the state of Maryland to actively and aggressively expand economic development opportunities here within the county. And I am also concerned, and this has been discussed many times by this and the previous council, that there are, for better or worse, a handful of families in Montgomery County whose capital gains tax and taxes we rely upon disproportionately to help fund the overall operating costs that we have here in the county and to help pay for capital expenses. And I've recently discussed with our Office of Finance, I'd like for us to conduct an assessment on the options that some of those families are starting to take advantage of, whether that's living in other states and residing there for 6 months and a day, or residing in other parts of our region. And I'm just concerned at a time where we're aggressively trying to work towards economic development that this is yet another talking point that our well-intentioned and well-meaning colleagues in other jurisdictions will be able to utilize to show why the businesses they're trying to recruit shouldn't be coming to Montgomery County. And I think we've got a lot of work to do, and my colleagues and I all unanimously agree that we have a lot of work to do with regards to economic development. And I don't think this bill at this time helps us in that regard. And while I agree with the principle from which it was introduced, and certainly respect very much that principle, and don't disagree, this is a conversation that we need to be having, particularly at the federal level, I think there is a practical reality of the impacts of bills like this on us locally here in Montgomery County. And so I don't support the bill at this time, but appreciate and respect the place from which it was introduced.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the robust conversation here. Really appreciate in particular the comments of Councilmember Albornoz. I was going to raise the issue. Every briefing we have, we talk about that small group of taxpayers, that small group of families. Those are specifically the people we're talking about targeting here. And those are specifically the folks that have choices about where they're going to live and whose tax revenue we rely on in order to fund all the progressive priorities that we have here. And so, you know, I think that you framed the danger and the challenges really well, Councilmember Albornoz, and I appreciate Councilmember Rice in particular talking about, you know, letting the cart go before the horse. I think that was similar to the letter that was sent from the chambers and other groups that was referenced by Ms. Wenger earlier about how there is a robust conversation happening at the state level and that we shouldn't necessarily get out ahead of that. So with that in mind, I wanted to move that we oppose the bill, and so I put that forward for colleagues' consideration.
It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been seconded. It's been moved by Councilmember Friedson, seconded by Councilmember Rice. We still have people that are going to be discussing this, though. Councilmember, is that you're finished? Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you. So I think that, you know, well, as chair of the committee that deals with taxes, there's no doubt that it's going to be important for us to have robust conversations about where we're going. I think the GO committee has, you know, been already on record saying that we are open to examining a lot of different fiscal policies. But I think that we have always said that we're going to do this in a comprehensive and thoughtful fashion. And, you know, we're constantly trying to figure out how to improve our state-led process, but this is one of those circumstances where, you know, even myself as chair of this committee kind of coming into this, hearing, you know, about this and seeing it in writing just very recently, reminds me also of my year as president. As, you know, I really tried really hard with my colleagues for us to work on frameworks and structural processes, because we do have some challenges. I mean, just this morning we heard that we have about 55,873 students in MCPS that receive free and reduced meals, and I believe what the percentage is, 70 or 80% that are 79% are free. And so Montgomery County, we have some challenges. And this notion of our economic development, or the perception of, it's no laughing matter. Early on last year, I commented to my colleagues this issue of the Prince George's piece, and it was interesting then to see the Washington Post write that article further down in the year. And so at some point, I guess, our job as a body is to figure out how do we want to position the county and what it is that we're trying to achieve holistically. And I appreciated the thought that, the work that went into drafting the bill. Yet I think that what the chambers have said, it's important for us, to be able to take some time to analyze this more comprehensively. This does not preclude us from doing that work. We can still look at our tax structures, et cetera, and work to see whether it is something that we want to pursue. But, as somebody who is now the veteran here on the council, one of the things I always enjoyed was the fact that we would work as a team when it came to requesting bills that were enabling legislation that the county council would then have to address. And so I do believe that we need to continue in that tradition. But more than anything, I think all this work with the Economic Development Platform and all this work to make sure that we are moving ourselves to a place where we can be competitive, it's something that I want to pursue and make a priority. So I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Like Councilmember Albornoz, I really appreciate the work from Councilmember Joando and Delegate Polakovich-Carr to develop new ideas. I guess my concern at the moment is there is a really significant tax proposal that is already on the table, and that is the tax services. And that is going to have a huge impact on our county's economy. And I feel like we ought to not confuse the conversation about that issue with additional proposals. I think we ought to let the state leadership kind of drive the train. And so, if we want to focus on tools to make our property taxes more progressive, we have the income tax offset credit that we can expand that. And, we look at that every year. But, I think that we ought to just hang back at this time and let the state process do its work and not complicate that matter with trying to drive funding proposals from the county level that are really reaching to the same goal. So I will also support the motion.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Joando.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just want to note that this is not a revenue-generating proposal, as I've outlaid. It has nothing to do with Kerwin, as was incorrectly stated. I understand we're going to talk about one later that potentially does on the income tax, but this is revenue neutral because of our charter cap, and this would shift who pays what, and it's more about a tax fairness and equity point, and has nothing to do with Kerwin. So just want to make that clear. The need to provide relief for middle-class families and the mechanism of the ITOC, I also proposed increasing that. That was agreed to by staff and also not agreed to by colleagues. So I'm glad maybe that there might be some change in that. From what I'm hearing as a mechanism, I hope there is. So I think that's a good tool. Big difference is that we have to pay for that. And that depending on how it's shifted, whereas this would be, again, shifting the burden, and depending on how high we go with that credit, and everyone gets it. And there's a point where it shifts. It's very complicated, as we've heard, but this is different. And so the question is, who's going to bear the burden? And I think there are many struggling families right now that need help. And this idea that tax avoidance, that people who would seek to leave our county, which is a great county, or cover their money and not pay what they're supposed to for a civilized society, which is what taxes are, the idea that we're going to make decisions based on that is a horrible precedent. And I appreciate everyone that's here that contributes to our society, including the wealthy. That's what we should do. And that's what we're called to do. in a civic society. And so the argument that because some people might seek to avoid tax rates, as they do internationally, that argument, you can use it for anything. Offshore accounts, that argument has no end. And there are times in this country's history where we were aggressive about that, and we didn't say that that was a good thing, and we shamed people who did it. And when FDR said our tax policy was 70–80% on the top tax rates, it's been slashed. What about the people who have had the marginal tax rates at the top lowered and the federal income tax on capital gains dropped? Where's all that income? A lot of it's here, and we're not collecting any of it. And so we have a role to play. We can't put our heads in the sand and say rich people are going to leave the county because we want to have a great county. And all this tool does is allow us to have that option in our toolkit. It doesn't say what the rates should be or where they need to go. It gives us the option. So I understand where this is heading, but I think we need to have all the tools available to us, as our municipalities do, so that we can make the best decisions for our residents.
Thank you very much. There are no other lights. We do have a motion before us to oppose this legislation. All those in favor of the motion to oppose the legislation, please raise your hand. And that's Councilmember Albornoz, Councilmember Rice, Councilmember Friedson, Councilmember Navarro, Councilmember Reamer, and Councilmember Katz. All those in favor? Against the motion, so therefore you'd be in favor of supporting this bill. Councilmember Giwando, Councilmember Glass, and Councilmember Hucker, Vice President Hucker. Thank you very much. We will oppose this legislation. Next is, go ahead.
And I apologize. May I just clarify, is that an opposition?
It was an opposition.
Or not a no position, it's an opposition?
It was an opposition.
Thank
Yep.
you.
And it's always interesting because it's someone voting in favor of this is voting to oppose it. So I tried to be clear. The next bill is HB 1494, and who has that one? Melanie?
I have it. So this is a piece of legislation that would allow for a higher local income tax rate, 3.5, which could be imposed on individual filers making $500,000 with net taxable income of $500,000 or more, or joint filers with net taxable income of $600,000 or more. It also allows for, in fact, actually requires a bracket system if any county chooses to increase its local income tax rate. And you could not, the bill specifically prohibits the ability to have a higher tax bracket have a lower rate than any of the lower brackets. So this is what the bill does. It allows county governments to access the comptroller's office to help create brackets. It does not require that the brackets are identical to the current state brackets. And so again, it's enabling, but it does, even for a county that would be at 2.6 right now and want to go to 3.2, they would be required to use a bracket system.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councilmember Giwando.
Thank you, Council President. This one is about raising revenue. And while not requested by me, I have been talking about it, as have several others, including the county executive in Anne Arundel County, Stuart Pittman, and others around the state, as a really good, potentially progressive way to raise the local share of the Maryland blueprint for Maryland's future, the Kirwan recommendations. For example, if we were to raise our rates from 3.2 to 3.5 on millionaires, for example, in Montgomery County, you could generate $88.4 million a year. Our total share of Kirwan recommendations is, under the current proposal, is $261 million, I think, or so over the 10 years. The important point here also, there's also a fairness point here. I think if you ask most residents, do you pay the same tax rate, income tax rate locally as a millionaire or someone, someone who's making $20,000 a year pays the same 3.2% as someone making $20 million. And we have that here. And so we have no brackets. We have zero brackets in Montgomery County in our local income tax. And this, again, is an enabling, and council staff recommended that we support it, would enable us to take a look and see if we want to make that system more fair, and also have the opportunity to increase that top bracket and raise some needed income. We always talk about, and I've heard many of my colleagues say, we need more revenue. If we're going to provide for those 80% of students who are on free and reduced lunch that we just talked about in Education Committee, if we're going to expand after-school programs, if we're going to invest in education the way we should, we need more revenue. And yes, the state should step up, and yes, the federal government should step up, but we're going to need more locally as well. And so I think this is an opportunity, a landmark, historic opportunity in the context of what we're doing at the state level, to look at how we can raise funds for our local share in those out years especially. And again, just gives us authority. We don't have to do it. And I think if you ask most county residents, is someone who's paying $20,000, $30,000 a year paying the same rate as someone making $20 million, they're going to say no, but they're wrong. And so we have to address that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I'll be opposing this with the same reasoning as the previous bill. Again, from a strategy perspective, the reality is that the state has more in their toolbox in terms of being able to fund Kirwan. The reality is that the state for decades has continuously underfunded education to the level at which we needed the support from the state, and local jurisdictions have had to continue to put in additional resources and tax its own local constituents to make up for that loss. The same thing has happened at the federal level, which is the reason why Senator Van Hollen has put in the Keeping America's Promise Act to make sure that the federal government ponies up when it comes to Title I funding as well as IDEA funding. This is something that I think we need to be very clear about and make sure that our residents understand we are not going to the well and asking them to continue to pay for others who are not stepping up and giving their full share as they should. MACO's position currently is that the state, with its multitude of avenues in which it can generate revenue, would be best served at being able to fund the Kirwan Commission recommendations. And so from that perspective, it is again dangerous for us to continue to talk about dollar amounts, specific dollar amounts that this local jurisdiction can raise, when at the same time we are asking the state to bear the major part of the responsibility in funding Kirwan, understanding we never got the full money from Thornton, and that we've been continuously taxing our residents to pay all of these times up until now. And so from that perspective, I would just urge folks to really think about this from a strategic standpoint. As I continue to go to Annapolis and ask that the state, in its progressive nature, can, and I want to remind folks that a tax on sales is incredibly progressive. Let me share with you, a tax on services is incredibly progressive. My wife, who used to work at Hair Cuttery and cut hair, charges $15. You don't have to go to a hair salon that she now works at to where they charge $100 for a haircut. The reality is there's a huge disparity between the two, and that's progressivity. And so a sales tax on that service would also be progressive. When we look at what happens with gym memberships, my membership that's county subsidized at LA Fitness, that's $25 a month, versus a person who chooses to go to Lifetime Fitness where it's over $100 a month. Again, a sales tax on those services would be incredibly progressive. And let's not forget the fact that not everyone who comes here and utilizes these services is a resident of the state of Maryland. The fair and equitable way to spread tax liability is to also put it on those who are non-residents of the state of Maryland and of local jurisdictions. When we look at our sales tax on goods as a whole, the reality is we have folks who come in from all different jurisdictions and come and shop here in Maryland. And so that's spread, and I don't have to talk about how the pricing of goods is also progressive in its own nature as well. We dealt with this when we had the special session in 2007. I wouldn't be asking my colleagues who now serve in the Maryland House of Delegates to do anything different from what I did back then. I raised my hand and raised the sales tax from 5 cents to 6 cents, a 20% increase in sales tax because we knew it was the right thing to do. And now I'm asking our state to step up and do the same thing again, to do what's right. I don't think that we should be continuously going to the well locally and asking our residents individually to be paying more when we realize that as a state, we know we can do it the right way. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer.
Thanks. I really find this proposal a little perplexing. I mean, it seems very premature. Like there's such a long way to go to talk about funding Kerwin, and for us to jump the gun and say, here's our proposal to fund our share locally now. We don't even know what our share really is. I think the committee chair, really said it well. Like, if this is the proposal from the county executives, where are the county executives? Like, the way that these things are going to happen is through a lot of process and organizing. Who knows if this will end up being the bill, or a proposal that is in the package, and whether that package is this year or 5 years from now. I just don't understand. I don't really see the. I don't quite understand the timing of this idea, and really why we're talking about it. We've got such a long way to go to figure out how we're going to pay for Kerwin, and as I said, let alone what our share actually is. I don't think that is really clear because the bill hasn't been passed. So, I think it's not the time to be putting forward revenue proposals around something that we don't even really have, that hasn't even passed the legislature.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you to the comments of the Education Chair and the Fed Committee Chair, which I wholeheartedly agree with about the cart getting ahead of the horse here. And I think it dovetails. I didn't get a chance to speak after the Government Operations Chair, who is responsible for our tax policy at the county level, but I think really her comments spoke volumes to that as well, about being thoughtful, intentional, and deliberate about how we address these issues, which has been the way which she has led our work on these issues, and so I appreciate that as well. I won't belabor the points that were made during the last discussion. I think the same points there hold true here, but we need to demonstrate as a county council, as political leadership, at this really important time for where we move forward, that we are focused relentlessly on growing the tax base and not only focused on raising the tax rates. And opposing this, I think, is the beginning of sending that message that we are in so many other aspects of the work that we are doing here with the economic development platform, with the work that each of the committees are doing to focus on economic development, for it to be not just part of what we do, but part of everything that we do at the county, because that is what maintaining our high quality of life, keeping up with our services, looking after the most vulnerable in our community, that's what it will be based off. We will never be able to keep tax rates up to be able to keep up with our needs. We have to grow the pie. We cannot do it in other ways, and that means making sure that we have the type of healthy economic growth, the type of sustainable economic growth, to be able to generate the revenue we need to keep up with what has always made Montgomery County a great place. So I move to oppose this legislation as well for those reasons, and hope to have the similar support of colleagues.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Friedson and second by Councilmember Navarro. We still have other people that would like to discuss this. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question for staff. What is MACO's position on this piece of legislation?
I don't think they've taken a position.
According to, would you like to say that on the mic, please?
MACO has not taken a position on the bill yet.
Okay. I appreciate that from our MACO member who's here on the dais. I do share the concerns that others have expressed with regard to the broader picture that our colleagues in Annapolis are trying to paint with regard to Kerwin and increased capacities for incredibly important needs that we have here in Montgomery County and throughout the state. And I do think it would be premature to get ahead of ourselves with regard to what they may or may not do. And I think that they have a lot of work still ahead of them, despite what we're seeing in the media in the last 72 hours or so. But I would like to see and hear more out of Annapolis as to what their vision for their pieces of legislation are, how they plan on funding it, and how they would like the counties, their counterparts, their partners, to work with them to achieve what we know we need to do. But I do think at this point in time, this is premature.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to point out again that these are enabling bills. It's our job to decide whether we should raise rates or differentiate rates. We should be in the business of having maximum authority and flexibility to respond to the needs of our residents. And to Councilmember Friedson's point, of course we should be expanding the tax base, and that be a priority. And we have all said that time and time again. What we haven't said at all, other than today, and some of us have said it and others haven't, is that we should also look at the other way to raise revenue and to do it in a more equitable and fair way. And you can have and should have, and it's our responsibility to have, both of those discussions at the same time. And there's not one way. You're not going to just get businesses to come here and grow our businesses, which I agree 100% we need to do, and I work on every day just like everybody else. That alone will not cure our tax fairness issues, our inequity, the flatness, the regressive nature of it, and will not help working and middle-class families alone. You must talk about both, and it's irresponsible not to. And so, again, I just don't know why we would not want to have more authority. Again, it's going to go through our great able GO chair. Anything authority we get, we'd have to discuss and talk about. We don't have to, these are illustrative proposals just so people can understand what might be possible. But I think we want to have flexibility for now and in the future. So I just wanted to make that point. I appreciate the discussion. I appreciate the delegates' work on our previous discussion, and thank the chair.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Rice.
So I'm only going to be here for 2.5 more years, so let me make sure that for my colleagues who are just joining the council and who haven't served in Annapolis, when you get enabling legislation that allows you to do something, when it comes to the negotiating table, folks are going to automatically assume that you're going to be able to do those things and count that against your saying, oh, well, we can't afford or we're not able to. Once you have enabling legislation that allows you to do something, then the conversation shifts, not from whether or not you should, but the simple fact is, well, you can, and so therefore you must, or you're not doing your part. That's the danger in enabling legislation. It's one of the reasons why I hate that we actually have to have these conversations in public, because then we're telegraphing our strategy and positions, which is why I really don't like taking up bills like this that are specifically designed around strategy that then telegraph what our strategy is, and we have to go out and say this. But the cart's out of the horse is out of the barn now, so we might as well say, I can tell you, and I've used it myself as a delegate, that when you have local jurisdictions that have the ability to do something, then I would say to them, well, you have the ability to go and raise your own taxes to make up that difference. So why are you coming to me and asking me for revenue when you can do it yourself? And so from that perspective, that is the danger of enabling legislation, is that then it becomes the assumption that you're going to do it, and to not only that you're going to do it, but to the maximum extent practicable. That is why I talk about strategy and say we need to be concerned about taking positive positions on these bills. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other lights. I did want to go on record and say that I, too, agree that this needs to be a comprehensive discussion for taxes in general, where we certainly have many, many tax discussions on the table from the state as well as the county, and I believe that this should be comprehensive as well. We have a motion and a second to oppose this legislation. All those in favor of opposing the legislation, please raise your hand. And that is Councilmember Alvarez, Councilmember Rice, Councilmember Friedson, Councilmember Navarro, Councilmember Reamer, Councilmember, no, you're not, yeah, and Councilmember Katz. Those opposed to the bill, that they would be in favor of this, please raise your right hand. I mean, opposed to the motion, that they would be in favor of the motion. Yeah. All those, please raise your hand. Councilmember Giwando and Councilmember Hucker. Councilmember Glass, you're not recorded.
Well, going back to the way we've run these things in before, I know there's a motion on the floor, but I would prefer that we take no position given the fluid nature of these entire conversations, rather than come out of the gate being opposed to this, quite frankly.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you. So we are opposed to this position. Next is House Bill HB 1249, and I believe Melanie has that one.
I do, thank you. So there was a conversation that occurred in a public hearing several weeks ago in Annapolis, where our House Delegation Chair, Delegate Corman, asked a series of questions of the, at that point, the acting director of the Maryland Department of Transportation, who's now he was secretary, acting secretary, he's now the Secretary Slater. And what this piece of legislation does is codifies the response that the Secretary gave to a litany of questions about the public-private partnership as it pertains to I-495 and I-270. So the listing before you is codified in slightly different language in the piece of legislation.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. This seems like a good bill. My question is very narrow, and I'm sure it'll be a work in progress to some extent, but the transit requirement that is built in here, I think it has a 10% of the revenue. My understanding of where we are in the process generally is that there is a mandate for SHA to come to some kind of agreement through an MOU with the county, and that's currently up in the air. And we're going to be working on our county transportation priorities, and that may be a vehicle to pin that down, or perhaps there's another vehicle. But I guess I just wanted to ask, this defines a certain approach to the transit component of the project, which is actually, I think, a little different from potentially what the county and the state might agree to. So I'm sure Delegate Corman is aware of that. But can you comment at all on how, if there's some, if that's a work in progress, how would that potentially be addressed?
I am certain that Delegate Corman is aware of that, and I am not. I'm not able to answer that question on his
So I guess what I really mean to say is we should be clear, and Councilmember Hucker may have some additional perspective here, but we should be clear, I think, on that point, that we understand that that's a work in progress, and so we are not seeking to necessarily define what the transit component is through this legislation. I don't know that we want that to be the end of the story. So as long as Delegate Corman is aware of that, that's all.
Thank you very much. I did ask for some, Council Vice President Hucker, please.
Just on Councilmember Reamer's point, two things. The revenue envisioned in the bill would come to the county in grants for transit projects, and then it would be up to the county executive and the county council to spend that money on transit projects. So it's not for any one project or another. It would be up to future councils and future county executives to do that, which I think is great and is long overdue. And just to the point about 10%, the bill does say at least 10%, and that's consistent with what Secretary Slater said to me in I think the first conversation we had after he became secretary, when I asked about how much transit funding he was going to intend to build in, he did say we were going to start at 10% as an assumption and hopefully be able to do more than that. So to see that codified into a bill, which I hope will become law, is refreshing.
Thank you. I did ask for clarification on the outline that we had. It said that a commitment made publicly, and I was concerned about where that public commitment had to be where it had to be made. And obviously, the bill summary actually has specifics as to what is going to be considered and when something is made public. Is there any opposition to this? If not, we are going to be supportive of it. Okay? And the next one, I think, is going to be even easier because that one was withdrawn, right?
But there's 3 more.
Yeah, I know that, but I'm saying the next one was withdrawn. So that, we are now going to the addendum. And the first one, I believe, Ms. Simon has that one.
Yeah, Amy?
Good afternoon. Senate Bill 656 would have climate impacts be added to the list of items that need to be considered by the Maryland Department of Environment, Department of Natural Resources, and other state agencies when they make recommendations to the Public Service Commission regarding the building of a new power plant. It also requires Department of National Resources to incorporate climate issues into the department's existing power plant research program. And so essentially what it's doing is requiring them to look at climate as a component when they're considering projects, as well as existing.
Okay.
The county executive is supporting of the bill.
County is supporting it, but and the council staff is recommending no position. Is there thoughts on what we should be doing? Council Vice President Hucker.
Thank you. This is a very mild bill that's very consistent with our stated values. So I'm really not I don't get the benefit to the council of taking no position when all this does is ask the Public Service Commission to consider something that we're in favor of. And consider is a very sort of soft requirement. So, and anyway, I believe we should support the bill.
Is that a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved that we support the motion. Is there a second? It has been seconded by Councilmember Reamer. Any other discussion? All those in favor of supporting the motion, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. The next one is HB 1545 and SB 887. And I believe you have that one as well.
That's
You did
correct.
so well in the last one. Why not try it again? There you go.
This one establishes a cap on carbon dioxide emissions for the 6 existing electric generating stations that burn coal. Montgomery County, of course, has Dickerson. They all have staggered timeline, but for Montgomery counties, it would be 2023.
Okay. Is there same Councilmember Reamer, please?
Well, I move that we support this. I think that we need to shut down our coal plants yesterday. You know, we should have done it 10 years ago. And we need to identify clean, renewable energy sources so that our grid can be powered by carbon-free energy. And I think we know from the state, I'll digress for a moment. I think we know from the state it's going to require tens of thousands of acres of farmland in the state to be devoted to solar. And we need to do our share on that here in Montgomery County. But I would have no qualms with shutting down the Dickerson coal plant, and I recognize that would, the PSC would have to figure out how to navigate in an uncertain environment there, but that'd be just fine with me.
Okay, it has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Hucker. All those in favor, please raise your hand to be supportive. And it's unanimous by those. It's unanimous. And the last one is,
This is Leslie's bill.
yes.
and it's the Developmental Disabilities Administration program
Please
changes and
speak
required
into the mic,
reports.
yeah.
Senate Bill 796. So as you may be aware, the State Developmental Disabilities Administration has been implementing a transformation plan for the last number of years. And part of that is developing a new, it's called a long-term services and support software. There is concern among the provider community that the intended rollout date for that of July 1 of this coming year was too soon, so this bill then delays that implementation until July 1, 2021. And another component of the bill is the delaying of the electronic visit verification until January 1 of 2021.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate Leslie's overview of the bill and want to thank my colleagues, and I in particular want to thank Beth Schuman from my office, who went around to each of your offices to sort of explain the context and background of this. As my colleagues will recall, our current colleagues who were on the previous council and our previous colleagues supported the commission of a work group to make recommendations to this body about how to enhance and improve services within the disability community here in Montgomery County. And the first recommendation of the dozen or so recommendations that were made was that this body, the County Council, work more deliberately with our state delegation to help support our disability community. And I really want to commend Delegate Collison and all of the members of the delegation who have been such strong advocates for our disability community. The rollout of this initiative has been challenging, to say the least. The communication has not been as effective as it maybe should have, and it has caused a great deal of anxiety and frustration and concern among what is already one of the most vulnerable populations that we have here in our community. And so what this bill essentially does is hold DDA accountable for what they say they intend to do, but to make sure that we solidify this and hold them to that standard and give us time to be able to more properly implement what is sweeping changes that will impact our service community. And I do want to acknowledge some of the strongest advocates for this are organizations that are right here in Montgomery County. And I also want to acknowledge the great work of Linda McMillan and our central office staff, who have been tremendous representatives of our body to this critically important community. And so we wanted to take the time to flag this particular bill for our colleagues, and I appreciate everyone's support.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much. And look, the chair said it so eloquently, I don't need to say anything but ditto. This is something that actually has been worked on for quite some time. When I was still in Annapolis, folks were talking about this issue, and folks who were getting dropped from services who didn't have notification. There was so much that's going on that's still broken about our system, and so making sure that we get it right before we roll out these recommendations is incredibly important. It's going to mean a lot for our families who continue to depend on these long-term care services to really help them, especially the parents of adult children who are continuing to struggle each and every day. And so I really want to thank Chair Albornoz for his leadership and everyone that he said before, those in the community who continue to do a great job, and all of the parents who continue to step up each and every day, even though we're not, as government entities, doing all that we should be doing to support them. So thank you for all of their dedication and support.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also want to thank Chair Albornoz and for his eloquency in describing this issue, and I think we should definitely support it. This is a community that has challenges already in amounts of funding and type and navigating the bureaucracy, and so we need to be doing all that we can to lower that level of complication and effort. I see Jen Lynn in the audience from Up County Community Resources, so we're happy. One of the many providers that was mentioned, and I have to give a shout out to neurodiversity. Council President Katz and I were able to attend a very cool rock band by an autistic group of not neurotypical folks, and it was really cool and very loud, and I really enjoyed it.
It was loud. It was cool, yeah.
Thank you for having me. But yes, really thank you to the chair again.
Thank you very much. And I saw Jen also yesterday at Ivy Mound, so I think she was just getting back from the party from the night before, but what the hey, that's right. Councilmember Albornoz.
So I forgot to formally move that we support this particular piece of legislation.
Okay, is there a second? Second. It's been seconded by Councilmember Rice, okay. Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, just very briefly, I also wanted to add my voice to the chorus of gratitude for Councilmember Albornoz's leadership on this. These are the most vulnerable residents in our community, and working with our state partners, which we need in order to make sure that they are protected and that we are looking after them is critical. So just thank you for that, and look forward to continuing the work of this body and that the HHS committee is leading the way on to move forward.
Thank you very much. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed, same sign, and it carries unanimously. We are supportive. And there's nothing else this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Have a
We
good
are
week.
adjourned. Do the same.